Good to be with you again. My name is Barbara Erkins, pastor of Key of Life Ministries, Cleveland Heights, Ohio. And just glad to come back to you so that we can just follow through on where we left off in conversation. Last time we were together, we were talking about the 3 prototypes of birth that God had in place. 1, he reached into the dirt, made a full-grown man. 2, he reached into the side chamber of man, pulled out a full adult grown woman. And 3, the power of the Most High overshadowed Mary. God came by, had a conversation with her. She received and conceived by the word of the Lord. And months later, Jesus came. And so the 3 prototypes of birth that were in place, God put those in place, I believe, because that was the plan God had all along for man to come to earth. Now, another thing we talked about when we were last together was the whole idea of remission, and I was saying it was remittance, but remission of sin. And I was saying how Hebrews tells us, Hebrews 9:22 tells us there's no shedding, remission of sin without the shedding of blood. And I talked about how in the Gospels Jesus made reference to if your hand offends you, to cut it off. If your eye offends you, pluck it out. And I was saying 2 things would happen by that concept, because people in 2013 are going to think, you know, I'm not cutting off my hand or plucking out my eye. But in what America refers to as third world countries, this kind of thing still goes on. And so 2 things would happen. 1, if the hand that is offended is cut off, then that body part that committed the offense is gone. And number 2, that body part that committed the offense now is shedding blood from that area. Wherever the offense occurred is a sin. The blood that is shed is the remitting for the act that was done with the body part. Now, the reason I was bringing this in is because we were talking about this whole notion of Adam and Eve running around with fig leaves screaming, I'm naked, because they supposedly what? Ate an apple or told a lie? We have to look at what is actually going on. We have to think about the whole idea of what is ordinary progressive thought in human beings. And we said before, the word apple is nowhere in the book of Genesis. And so Adam and Eve were actually entering into some act with Satan that caused them to bring destruction to the entire universe. Okay, little Johnny, I said the last time, if he steals a cookie from the cookie jar and mom says you couldn't have one until after dinner, if she comes in the kitchen and catches that cookie in his hand, first thing he's going to do is drop the cookie and maybe hide his hand behind his back. Little Johnny knows the hand of offense, the hand that committed the sin, is getting ready to be in trouble. Maybe mom will reach into that drawer in the kitchen and get a mixing spoon out and give him a couple of whacks. But he's not going to start screaming, I'm naked. He's not going to run around trying to cover up his penis, or she's not going to try to cover up her vagina. We are not running around screaming, we're naked. Okay, so here we are again. Now I want to go back and finish this thing about the remission of sin by the shedding of blood. As I said, Jesus makes the comment, cut the offensive part, pluck out the offensive part. He says so that you don't go into hell halted and maimed. He says so just tear it off of your body. But God, when Adam and Eve sinned, he took animals, slayed an animal, shed its blood, and he used the skin of those animals to cover Adam and Eve. The book in Genesis actually shares the fact that God covered them. The Bible refers to it as tunics of skin or tunics of cloth, but we know he got that skin from an animal. The reason he got the skin from the animal is the animal had to have shed blood because the animal had to be killed. All right, so I want you to really be thinking about concepts of God. The Bible tells us, and we know this, if you're a Christian, we know that we accept Jesus Christ, we accept his name, and we believe in his name, and we believe him to be the Son of God, and that he shed his blood on Calvary and gave his life, that in the entire world, whoever confesses Jesus as Savior, they will be saved, because there's no remission of sin without the shedding of blood. And as you go on in the Bible and in the story, you find that Jesus presents his blood at the mercy seat, and it's received by God and by heaven. There's a rejoicing and an excitement, and right then and there, he purchased our life and brought us out of damnation and brought us into salvation. Okay, so that law works across the board constantly. No remission of sin without the shedding of blood. And so let's go back and look at this. Let's take a look at Genesis 17. We know that in Genesis in the Bible, in the book of Genesis 17, God decides to enter into a covenant with Abraham. And I'm jumping ahead a bit. I want you to understand what happened. God enters into a covenant with Abraham. And he tells him that he's going to cause there to be a sign and an indication of this covenant in his body. And what does God do? Read it for yourself. But God institutes what is called the covenant. The Abrahamic covenant is circumcision. And so what he does, he goes after that man and says, okay, one time, I'm going to hit you where it hurts, baby boy. And I'm going to make it known to you and to all the people that come after you. All your male seed shall all be circumcised if they're to be in my house. And so he hits him right there. And we have what? The very part of the body, I believe, that committed sin way back with Adam and Eve. We have that body part, what? Shedding blood. What happens for the woman? If you read in Genesis 3, and that whole part where God starts naming all these things, that Satan himself is cursed. He tells Adam how things are no longer going to be the way that they should be, and he tells Eve what her lot in life is. Well, in Genesis, around the third chapter of Genesis, around the 16th verse, God says there's going to be a multiplication of conception and sorrow. He said, girl, you have really messed up. You going to have all kind of babies you don't plan to have. And he said, and you're going to have lots of pain and crying. And he said, oh, by the way, your husband's going to rule you. And your desire is going to be for him. Guess what happened before they entered into this agreement with Satan? Adam and Eve's desire was only for the Lord. They only worshiped God. He would come in the garden in the cool of the day and they would fellowship with him. All of a sudden, the whole plan fell apart. Now, you're probably saying, okay, Pastor Barbara, you know, how are you getting this? I believe that in Genesis 3:16, not only was there multiplication of conception and sorrow, but there was also, I believe Genesis 3:16 is where the woman started having her monthly cycle. And so, let me finish that thought of remission of sin and shedding of blood. Every month that a woman has the ability, once she comes into childbearing years, every month that she has the ability to bring forth life, she's going to bleed as a sign that this did not happen. And so she's going to shed blood. God gets the man one time, circumcises that area. I know before the fall, we weren't having monthly cycles. Come on, ladies, there were no cramps. There was no, PMS, there was none of this. After the fall, the cycle starts and the men are circumcised. Both body parts, I believe, that were entered into sin, there's shedding of blood from those body parts because both of those body parts are now the way they have the ability to bring forth life and to procreate. Now, let's back up again and look at something else. In the garden, God tells Adam that he is going to have authority and dominion. He says you're going to have dominion over the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air. You're going to rule everything that creepeth upon the face of the earth. You have dominion and authority over all of the animals. Now, if I rule animals and I'm in charge of animals, how is it that I'm going to be like the animals? Well, many times we've overlooked this verse, but it's over in Ecclesiastes 3. God says that he looked and saw that the sons of men were as the beasts, the very animals that they rule. Now, how am I going to rule something and be just like it? I've got to be greater than that which I rule. I've got to have some kind of mastery or authority over that which I rule somehow. And I'm not making a reference to like the lion who's the king of the beast or the lead bull elephant who's over the herd. Not that. We were clearly told in the first part of Genesis we were going to rule, and now all of a sudden God says, I see that he is the beast. He is as the beast. Because I believe what happened is that the procreation God wanted was based on what we read in Proverbs 18:22. God said, let me tell you where life is. Life is in the power, the power of death, and life is in the tongue. And I believe we were going to procreate out of here instead of out of here. And so once we started procreating out of here, what woman needs to have 5 and 6 babies at one time? You only got 2 of these. This is not making sense. The puppy, the dogs that come, the female dog after she has all her litter of puppies, is plenty of room down there for all the pups to get a drink. We only end up with 2. How are you having 5 and 6 babies at one time? This was not the plan. And so we started entering into multiplicity of birth and multiplicity of conception and all of this. And we've got these great numbers, astronomical numbers of billions of people in the earth, because I don't believe that was God's original plan for procreation. We were to create like he created. Out of the power of the mouth, he created, life and death. By any other name is still sex.